How about this? All right. Have you looked at your spouse and thought, man, are we roommates now? Nobody gets married and hopes that, yeah.
Nobody wants a roommate.
Just pass me the Cheetos. Let's sit back and watch TV, whatever like that. How do you get that spark back if you are in that place of being a roommate? We have one of our
favorite guests.
Oh my goodness. And you guys loved her last time she was on with us.
Yes.
Officially, Beth Miller, aka also known as Soulify Wellness.
Yes.
Beth, welcome back to the Mr. and Mrs. Mr. podcast show.
Oh, I'm so excited to be back. I love you guys. You are amazing. Thank you for having me back.
We love you as well. And thank you too. We're still getting messages from the last time you were here. So we're always loving the information that you have. You help so many women across the world, like in situations like this. So like we go through a lot. So we try to share our ups and downs of what we go through, but it's great to have people on like Beth who have a wealth of knowledge that can get to that place. So, but on today, as we talk about, if you're just listening or watching for the first time, we've been married for almost 16 years. We have 2 kids, and craziness happens all over every time. I'm Jeffrey Mr., aka Mr. Mr. Right beside me is my wife,
Mrs. Mr., aka Dana Mr., and together we are the Mr.
Yeah. And you are our MF
family.
Mr.
Yeah, Mr. family.
So don't confuse it with anything else. So welcome if you just joining on. We push you to subscribe and get on this train. We have a goal of reaching 7 million couples. Will you join us? Come aboard this train. We want to not just survive, but thrive in marriage. And so today we're getting into roommates. So you may be looking around thinking, look, that beautiful person or whatever adjective you use has now become the roommate of who I am.
Yeah. And so basically when you say roommate, what are you trying to explain more so what roommate is?
That's what I was going to ask Beth. So Beth, when you think of roommate, like a married roommate, what comes to mind?
The biggest thing that comes is no physical intimacy. That would be the number one. You're not having sex with your roommate normally. Maybe not. Maybe you are. Typically you don't, but maybe you are. Back in university days, who knows?
That's a good point there of really thinking about, okay, now that maybe, okay, I heard Beth say no physical intimacy. So somebody may be listening or watching right now thinking, you know what? When was the last time we've hugged or embraced or kissed?
Or smacked them on the behind?
Yeah, I want to talk to all husbands right there. Do not let your wife bend over, pick up anything without you going in and getting a grab. That's why you put the ring on it for. Going in and showing that affection, showing that love. And I also say this too, and I hear some people, disagree with me here. I want my kids to see me become, playful and affectionate with my spouse throughout that point. It helps you grow up, and become,
Yes. But make sure you let your kids know you're playing, okay? Because it's so funny with the kids see me and Jeff and I yesterday, for example, we were playing that he took a picture of me that was inappropriate. And I know what? Jeff, and he will try to post it on social media.
No way. Look at this face.
Whatever. And so I was trying to get his phone to delete the picture. And the kids saw me running after him. And Jace went after him. He was like, get my mama. He don't even know what was even happening. And Malia too was like, what are you doing? So yeah, so make sure they know you're playing.
No, they did. Yep. And they always say, that's disgusting. But I think deep down they enjoy that. So somebody's listening right now and saying, you know what, we haven't ran over each other after a while, and that's fine. And so stay tuned at this point. What are some of the things that lead up to
being a roommate?
Being roommates?
Yeah. Well, that's a good question. I would think I would even start with the question, like, why are we roommates? Like, we can talk about what leads up. And I think everyone's so unique, and it's usually a it's a slow slope down. Like, it's not like all of a sudden tomorrow we're roommates. We're like totally in love, totally engaged with each other, like dating hardcore. And then all of a sudden we're like back to roommates. No, it's slow. And so you got to look at what's happened over the past, like whatever it is, 2 years, 5 years. Often kids, I would almost guarantee kids have been thrown into the mix, which contribute to the roommates, right?
Yes. Can I put a quarter? Where's the change? Can I put a piece of check, put a quarter in there and park there for a second? That's the conversation I was having yesterday too. And I I really wanted to get into that place, right? Kids are blessed. We have two. Beth, you have what? You have
three boys, ages 6,
So
8, and 10.
yeah, so 6, 8, and 10. So like, all right, so like a 2-year difference in between each time. So
Yes.
you have a you've lived through this, we've lived through this. We talked to a lot of couples who are just having kids now, and like the baby is like this, or they've had twins, and they're like, what in the world have we done at that point in time? And so then they just become like, okay, who's doing the duty for the child? And I think sometimes that carries over after that child gets a little older, and now we've conditioned ourselves to just be parents and not be spouses, to that situation. Is there anything that you can kind of add to that context of like, what is that? Like you said, it's not like one day of like, oh, we were good, and then we were chasing each other yesterday. Now we're roommates.
Right.
It's typically a stair step type thing.
Process.
Yeah, that goes through. I love the question you asked initially. What does that look like off those steps? Like, what could that look like for our listeners?
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess we could just kind of skip to like, let's look at this. Let's look at why. Like, why has this even happened? I think because we can all tell our own story as the sad doomsday, like, yeah, we're not connected anymore. We're total roommates. He's done this to me, she's done this to me, or we don't connect in this way. But if we can just, from maybe a solution-based position, really be like, why are we like this? Getting so curious. And so often I hear couples say, we're too busy. I'm too busy. And the word busy is a really interesting word. I always like to take a word and figure out, what does it mean to you? What does it mean to me? Often the word busy actually means it's not a priority. And it's not that it's in a mean way that you're not a priority, or us having time together to snuggle or go on date nights isn't a priority, because that can sound really mean, but it really is what it is. Like, I'm putting my kids first. I'm maybe putting work first. I'm putting other things first before you. So just think about what your priorities are. Are you too busy? Is that why you're disconnecting at this point? So I would check with that word. It's kind of like the word divorce. I'm just going to throw this out there too. When someone says the word divorce, that's a big word, but so often the signs have been there before in regards to communicating. What does divorce mean? It means I'm not feeling heard. I'm not feeling understood. Something has to change. I can't do this anymore. Like, that's really what you're communicating when you're like, I need a divorce. It doesn't mean you really want to separate that person. Like, usually when the word first comes out, it usually means I can't do this. Something needs to change. And someone just pulls it out of their like back pocket because, you know what, this is going to get me heard. If I say the word divorce, you know what, you're going to hear me. And then that can be really devastating too. But it's just, I think it's really important to look into words. The word divorce. Why are you so busy? I'm just, work is a priority, kids are a priority, scrolling on my phone on Instagram, listening to the Mr. and Mrs. podcast, that's my priority.
You stepped on toes. Yes, all of those things can kind of jump in to where you're doing it. I was doing a lot of research, just on this topic too, and like a lot of it comes from childhood, of seeing how our parents did those things. So like, did we see those things happening? We've talked about this too on like previous, episodes. So go back and listen or watch those episodes too as well. But like, that sets the foundation for how we interact for the most part. Now you can learn from it, but like I've seen, we typically use that as our ground floor to how we interact with our spouse in a lot of different situations.
Yeah. And I think I would say this too. A lot of times, I know for me, I grew up where my mom was pretty much, she ran the household, like, she made sure everything was good, ran us to our school, everything, right? And so one of the things though that I did share with Jeff was, I don't want to become a roommate, right? I think a lot of time as women, or sometimes even the father, they take more of the role of the household and getting the kids. And so it could come off as the children being the priority. But if you take more so a team approach, whereas, okay, if you do this, child, you know what I'm saying? You take more of a team approach, then that way at the end of the night, everybody is not like, one person is not deadbeat tired, right? So I think that's one of the ways that I would feel like people will be able to combat, because I see it all the time where one person in a household takes on majority of the role, right? They take on, okay, I got to work, I got to take all the kids to 50 million activities, or, and then helping with homework and all of that. So I believe it's so important to communicate with your spouse. Okay, hey, I'm feeling, like I shared with you, I was like, I'm feeling overwhelmed, right? Because And no offense to Jeff,
Oh,
he has the luxury of working from home. Well, I don't, right? I don't have that luxury for working from home.
Mhm.
So I was telling her, I was like, I feel overwhelmed because I have to work from home. I'm trying to get back into working out. I'm trying to make sure the kids go to soccer, piano, ballet, gymnastics, all of that stuff, where you, in my mind, it was like, you working from home, then you get to go to the gym. And that's, you know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
So I had to communicate.
Are you feeling resentful at all?
That's what I was trying to get to.
I was feeling resentful. I was feeling, I was like, you know, here I am. I'm like on two wheels. You know, I'm on two wheels. And so, but I realized, I was like, well, it's unfair to him for me not to communicate that, because in his mind, he's just like, oh, she good, you know. But I had to communicate to him, hey, I am feeling overwhelmed and I need your help. So yesterday, prime example, Jace had soccer, Malia had gymnastics and choir. You know, he didn't want to drive all the way over to soccer. He was like, well, I take Malia because that's closer. And I was cool with that, right? Because like, okay, now everybody made it home at a certain time. We can eat dinner together, like all of that stuff. So
yeah. I'm glad you brought that up. You know what? That's a big piece of heading into roommate zone, is when you hit this resistance, and the resistance is asking your partner, I need help with this, or can you help with the kid? Can you initiate putting the kids to bed? Can you put the dirty dishes in the sink? And so when you're hitting this constant resistance where you're not feeling heard by your partner, you're trying to communicate that you're overwhelmed, whether you're communicating it effectively or not, or whether it's being heard effectively or not. When you hit this resistance over time, like if this were to happen every day and Jeff were not to listen, what happens is that creates resentment. And you said you were heading a little bit into the resentment category, but you were able to backtrack and catch yourself being like, that's not fair to project that onto him. You caught yourself. But there's so many couples who don't catch themselves when they hit that constant resistance, and they head into resentment. And resentment's a super slippery slope heading right into roommate zone, because that's when we start to layer up all these emotions. That's where the anger for not getting help comes in. That's when we start to feel bitter. We start to feel kind of sad that things aren't going the way we want them to go. And when we start to build up all those layers, that's when we start building our walls up. And our walls are when we're like, you know what, I'm shutting down. I'm done with this intimacy because I'm hitting so much. I'm getting rejected. I keep putting my what I need, my needs are being communicated, but I'm getting rejected every time. So then when those walls are up, forget it. There's no emotional intimacy at that stage. And for a lot of women, when there's no emotional intimacy, you can forget the physical intimacy.
Yep.
You said,
and then for men, I was playing yesterday. It sounds like the crazy cycle, right? So it's like, if that goes on, if I don't know how to communicate, or I've tried to communicate in a way and the person didn't receive it, or maybe I was angry, you know, out of frustration, it doesn't get hurt. And then for men, especially for a lot of us, physical intimacy is how we receive a lot of the love. So if I'm not getting that, then it's like, okay, now I'm less likely to be supportive of carrying the kids, you know, an example to one of the things. So then it builds back up on the wife's side. And she's like, well, I tried to do this. And then it just kind of goes back and forth to how do we get off of that crazy cycle? And one more quick point. You hear from people after like 5 years or 8 years, like, you know what? I haven't been happy for 5 years. I haven't been happy for 10 years or something like that. And so you would think, like, what happened those incremental moments that in just that day of frustration of being able to communicate that before you get to that point? Like you said, now I've built up a wall and a callus, and I can't really even engage from that. Or if I do, like, it comes from like so much of a piece of hurt that I can't even get to a compromise or solution. So that
But I just think when you were talking about that cycle, I think it's one thing though, it's so important though, as somebody's gonna have to be the vulnerable partner here, right? Somebody's gonna have to get off that crazy cycle, right? And I believe it just has to, you have to recognize, hey, do I want this to work? Do I want my marriage to work? Do I want to have a healthy marriage, you know, for the sake of the kids and, you know, all of that stuff, or the sake of the two of you, and then the kids to have like a strong foundation. So I believe that's why it's so important that somebody in that relationship has to be the vulnerable partner, because I see, you know, a lot of times where both partners just completely check out, like, well, you know what, I'm not gonna be vulnerable. I'm not gonna be vulnerable. So you become that roommate, and then eventually gradually is going to head to divorce, because I don't know, well, as nobody that I know wants to be in a relationship where it's just like we're roommates, that's, nobody wants that, or at least I wouldn't expect for people to want that. Yeah.
No, absolutely not. Absolutely. I totally agree with that. And that's when I can step in. I can help you or whoever's going through this, because what we're going to do is we need to get to the root of that hurt.
Mhm.
So that one partner that's like, you know what, I have another try in me. I don't want to get divorced. And often divorce is so much more than just two people separating. It's the kids, it's
Mhm.
their lifestyle. There's
It's
so
everybody
Family,
feels,
everybody.
yeah.
Yeah, the dog.
the
Who
dog,
gets the dog?
absolutely.
Who gets the dog?
So true. So when that one person wants to finally get off, I love how you called it the crazy cycle, where it's just like, when can I get off this roller coaster of walking on eggshells? When can I get off this roller coaster of just feeling like I've closed my heart? Like I'm just not going to be vulnerable anymore to open my heart or even ask for help anymore, because I know I'm always disappointed. So when you're ready to get off that crazy cycle and you want to be the one who's going to really change, I always suggest you work on yourself first. I'm like, you can go to couples counseling and work on maybe communication between the two of you. But what's going to make the biggest difference fastest is if you each start doing individual work on your own. And it starts, you can do this on your own or with a counselor or coach. But what you want to start doing is identifying, we've talked about this before, is start looking at every time you feel that hurt, every time you feel triggered, what is happening. And it's so interesting. A lot of times when I feel like, just say I felt hurt because I've been asking my husband, we need to talk about finances and banking. Like I feel like our debt's piling up. Just say if I were to talk to him, he keeps shutting me out. What happens is a lot of times that hurt, yeah, it's coming from my husband, but often there's like past family dynamics from like
Say
your
that.
childhood, or there's past experiences from past relationships, or even your current level of self-esteem, which is all playing into it. It's this really complicated equation. It's usually not just your partner's constant responses. It's often these other hurts over years and years and years that are just really blowing up in your marriage. It's amazing how your marriage is a magnifying glass for everything that needs to be worked on within you.
Yeah,
And when we can
absolutely.
flip our marriage and realize our marriage is our greatest teacher,
Yeah.
that's when you can really, really take all the suffering within your marriage and turn it into good.
Yes, the soul. You can tool
Yeah.
the soul up there and get
Because,
some.
and this is what I shared with Jeff before, and I feel like your marriage is like your foundation, right? It's like the foundation for, it sets the tone for everything else in your adulthood, right? And so I feel like our marriage should be like our safe zone, right? It should be like our safe zone where, like, with everything else that's going on in the crazy world, at least this right here, I want this to be strong. I want this, like, I don't want to be mad at Jeff. I want to be mad at whatever the issue is, whatever the problem is, right? But I think a lot of times it's the reverse cycle, right? All the stuff, all the pressure from work and all of that stuff, we hurt the person we supposed to love and adore the most, right?
Yes,
so like everything, the hurt from our childhood, from our jobs, when people talking to us crazy or whatever it is, we flip it where it should be the opposite. Like this should be like, Jeff, like, this, can you believe this crazy person, like da, 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 and he gets a whole bunch of that. Because for me, I'm like, I want to make sure I maintain this as my safe zone. Like I want to be able to say, hey, this is my safe zone versus the opposite. I hope that makes sense. Yeah.
It's a small nugget that made me think before I forget it, is the fact of many times like we treat everybody else with wonderfulness and butterflies and flowers, and a person that we made vows with, but God is standing for God and got married, that's who we treat the worst. And I think it's in terms of like, we feel like that person's not going to go anywhere.
Yeah.
But the person I work with, my supervisor, my, whoever, my sorority sister, whoever, like they could leave. And so like we take advantage of just that. You have to be with me now. You have to be with me. And so, but go ahead, Beth.
Yeah. No, you're almost living a double life when you like. I think that's actually a really good example. If you feel like you're treating everyone else a lot nicer than your partner, like you're unloading on them, really you're probably not completely processing emotions properly. Like there's stuff happening at work and you're probably not speaking up for yourself. You're probably feeling even more resentful at work based on maybe people overlooking you for promotions or piling too much stuff on your desk or not giving you enough praise. You're probably taking that resentment and double projecting it onto your partner when you get home. So you're not acting authentically. You're not acting like yourself in your other situations. And so you're just piling up that pain. What's really interesting too, I was going to mention this, is when you talk about resistance, a lot of times men, they feel like they hit resistance. They don't feel heard, or it's because they feel this way a lot. You can maybe, Jeff, tell me if you think
Mm.
this is correct, but a lot of times it's because they feel like their masculinity could be being challenged possibly.
Yeah,
Sometimes it's even they feel
definitely.
disrespected. Dana, I love how you were saying how you and Jeff, he's your safe space, he's your safe spot in life. And so often that doesn't happen. And the reason it doesn't happen for a lot of couples is because men in particular, they won't feel safe to talk to their wives in an open,
Mm,
non-judgmental way. And you can tell me if this is true, Jeff, but a lot of times they feel like they have something to say, but if they get challenged in a way that feels disrespectful, or their masculinity gets challenged, or sometimes even their authority, like their ability to make decisions, when that gets challenged, they all of a sudden don't feel safe in the relationship too. And then they start to build up that resentment, which means that they all of a sudden don't want to hear their partner's needs as much because they are building up the layers of like anger and upset from their partner.
yes, Beth. Oh, you saw my hands go. Yes, and it's so many times that if respect is not there, we will shut down for the most part. So like, it's if you're talking to us in an angry way, and maybe it's from hearing your mother talk a certain way, it's like, nope, I'm just going to this is not for me in a situation to where emotions may be in. So definitely that. So ladies, wives, start with respect, even if it's something you're angry about. If you won't change, and so I always ask this: do you want change or you want to be heard? And so if you want to be heard, then have whatever saying you want to have. But if you won't change, you have to come in a way that that man can hear you too. And for me, and also too, like, don't respond in emotion and anger as well. So being able to hear that, but respect has to be at the door first for us to be able to process that.
But Beth, go to with the point where you was talking about like respect for men and respect for women, because I think a lot of times women don't realize they being disrespectful to their significant others, right? I mean, because I don't believe nobody intentionally wants to say, "Oh, I'm just coming in disrespecting you," right? Well, I wouldn't expect that to be right. So I believe it's good to. So can you speak a little bit more on that about like respect for men and respect for women, what that looks like?
Yeah, often I agree with you. Most of us come from a place where we just have the best intentions. Maybe we're not articulating it the way we need to.
Right.
And sure, maybe you're not articulating well, but the receiver. So just say I was saying something to Jeff and Jeff thinks it's disrespectful. You know what? His emotions are his emotions. I didn't
Right.
make him mad. I didn't make him frustrated. He needs to
Right.
own that. Yes, maybe I said some things that triggered him, triggered anger within him, but it's not me that made him feel a certain way. So I think that's when one of the spouses really needs to kind of step up and be like, you know what, I don't want to react with anger anymore. You can tell yourself to stop acting angry, but it probably won't work very well. So what you need to do is get to the root of it. And that's why I love couples counseling. I truly do. But unless you do some of the deeper work on yourself, I can tell you over and over again, talk nicer to her. Say, I would like to be nicer to you. Use your I statements, but it won't stick. 2 weeks later, you'll fall off the wagon back into that crazy cycle that you referred to because you haven't done the deeper work to really understand why that anger keeps coming up. Is it because you don't was it because that's how you witness even your parents react? Was it anger that people used in your life? Like, why is that anger even there? And then that's when this gets really fun for me. I love digging into our like inner child wounds, but that's where so much of the conflict comes.
You like to make people cry, don't you? You like to make
I do. If you don't cry with me, you probably don't need my help.
Give me the tissue.
I'll add this too. When it comes to roommates, I can tell you, like, if you don't want to be a roommate anymore, go on more date nights. Yes, snuggle more. You can do all that, but it's not really going to fix the problem. This roommates is really a symptom of a lot of other deeper rooted stuff that comes from this hurt. It comes from the resistance. It comes from feeling rejected. That's why it's there. Go on more date nights. You can try. And if that fixes it, you probably don't have these deeper things to deal with. It's something else. But for most people, you got to go deeper.
It's internal. It's internal.
Yeah. Conflict. You guys talk about conflict. And in most relationships, there is somebody who will get into conflict. And there's one person that avoids it, for the most part. And so in those instances, like, you could have one person either overpowering them, or you could then avoid it because of, I don't want to get into an argument. Like you said, finances, maybe it's sex, maybe it is work related, maybe it's picking the kids up, or something like that. So it's like, in those times of conflict, what are some things that spouse that doesn't mind getting in conflict and a spouse that like avoids conflict, what could they do in those moments?
Oh, I love this. You know what? It's going to take practice, but what you really need to do is go address those issues on your own. Why do I shut down? Why am I shutting down? Or why do I unleash my anger? Really, you got to go separately. It's not something you fix in that moment. You got to go get your journal, or you need to figure out, why is this pattern within me? Why do I shut down? It's because, you know what, in the past, I communicated my feelings a lot. Instead, I met with either not feeling heard, I'm feeling like shut down, like they tell me I'm wrong, or there's just so much going on. Maybe as a kid, when you expressed your opinions as a kid, your parents didn't seem to really care. They tell you to stop crying, or that's not a big deal. Or, you know what, I had it way worse when I was a kid. What you have is nothing. So depending on how you were treated as a kid, when you expressed your needs, if it was shut down or met with resistance, then you may shut down again with your partner, even though your partner has the best intentions, but it's throwing you back to childhood stuff.
Yeah. And I would say this too. I think we need to recognize that anger is okay. I think having anger, it's a good emotion to have. I love the movie Inside Out. That movie is in my mind. I love that movie because it teaches you, like, it's okay to have all these different emotions, right? And it's natural. I mean, God had these emotions, right? And so, but I believe it's how you handle it, how you respond, right? One of my, even with my kids now, I'm teaching them, like, it's okay. The way that you're feeling is fine, right? I want you to be able to articulate and communicate when you're ready, but we're not going to leave it alone, because I know sometimes it takes some of us a little bit longer to process and all of that stuff. But I want to teach them it's okay, that anger is okay. I believe so many times, I know for us growing up, it was like, you should suppress it, or, don't worry about it.
That's just the way things have to be.
Exactly. Life happens. Yes, suck it up. Like all of those. And I'm just like, no, it's okay for me to be angry. Like, right. And I believe having a partner that understands that we both, like, your relationship is not going to be perfect all the time. And anger is okay, but it's how you process it. And like, I love what you stated, going back to like working on your own individual self. And then, because if you're not working on yourself constantly, it's going to be even more challenges to work on a relationship with your partner. So
somebody's listening to this now, is going like, okay, I hear Beth saying, I hear what Dan saying, he was just saying, okay, I'm working on myself. And then I think the expectation, right? So when I'm working on myself, like the natural expectation is, okay, I feel better. I'm not angry. I'm not emotionally going through.
Things come even harder.
And it's going there. And I'm not seeing the results, from my spouse. What advice do you have there for somebody who is working on themselves? What are the next expectations after I'm calling Soulify Williams after this? I want to get with her. I want to heal this inner child wound that I have. That's a thorn in the flesh of my marriage right now. And I'm working on that. What do you tell people after that? What should they expect in their relationship with their spouse, with themselves, in that same book?
Yeah, great question. So once you've really done some looking back, some detective work on your past, and really understand, you know what, my parents did the best they could with what they knew at the time. I know maybe they didn't tell me they loved me as much as I needed to hear, but I can sense that they did love me in their own ways. And maybe loving me was working really hard so that they could put a roof over my head, food in the fridge. Maybe that was their way of loving me. You know what, I can come to terms with that. I can understand they love me. So when you're at a place where you can look at your past and be like, I understand it. You know what? It really wasn't about me. Everyone around me was trying to love me, communicate with me the best they could. So you're at a better place. And so when you're having these disagreements with your partner, whether it's about money or who's going to pick up the kids, when you have those disagreements, all of a sudden you're going to be in a place where you're not fighting back, or you're not shutting down. So the only person that can fight or shut down is your partner, but you're not going to contribute to that anymore. It's not going to escalate the same way. And the funny thing that happens is two things can happen. Things can get really good right away, or they can actually get worse. And I will warn you, things get worse. And the reason they get worse is because your partner all of a sudden doesn't recognize you. They're like, oh, are you better than me? You've worked on yourself. Why are you not fighting with me anymore? And so they don't recognize you. They're used to the adrenaline, like the hormones that are released when you fight. They're addicted to the fight sometimes. And so the things can actually get a little worse. But then over time, it depends on how much time, we're talking weeks even, all of a sudden they realize, you know what, this is a safer space for me to communicate in. I don't feel judged. I don't feel nagged. I actually feel a little more supported. And so they start to open up. Your partner will open up and maybe get more vulnerable with you and tell you what their needs are. And you're going to hear it more because you see your partner. You can actually see some of their past, and you can be like, oh, I understand. His mom was not very present, and I can understand why he can't communicate this and this to me. So that's usually what happens next.
Wow. And so I know because we have expectations. If you go to the gym, you're thinking, I got the 6-pack. As soon as I leave the gym, there's an expectation.
That's a
there.
good analogy.
There's a
right
great
there.
expectation.
Yeah.
I know people who leave the gym and they're like, I haven't lost any weight. I just did one.
Or even after 2 weeks or 3 weeks, you know, some people give it a little bit longer. And if you don't see the results that you're seeking, you quit. Then, you know, but sometimes we have to look back and adjust. And this just example, I love that analogy though, because like you may have to say, well, maybe I need to go check my meals, or maybe I'm eating more sugars, or maybe I'm eating too much fruit, or, you know, so it's trial and error, right? Like it's trial and error. So,
and also too, like being able to look at yourself. So like, you can criminalize your spouse in those moments, especially when you're doing the good thing, like you said before, like, you know what, I am taking time for me, I'm healing my inner child, and look at them, look at Dana over there, still, and you can start to criminalize them because they, I don't know, are not moving at the same speed that you're going through in the process of healing and whatnot too. And then now it creates a new conflict because now they're not good enough for you anymore. And it can open the door for somebody who's coming and saying, you know what, look at this person, look at this guy that is healing himself, or look at this lady who is, you know, oh, she can communicate. My spouse never, he just wants to watch sports when he comes home. Look at this guy. And you can open yourself up to other people coming in if you don't have that. So I love that you named, like, it might get worse even when you're doing the work first, but it's the long suffering piece of like, you know what, I'm in it for the long run and not just a good feeling right now. So
it's so true. Like, yeah, you nailed it. It's a long game. It really is. And the thing is, when you get to this place where you really start to work on yourself, you approach everything in your life with such, it seems so cheesy, but really, like, you talk to people in such a loving, kind way. Like everything you say is like your truth. Like you're not going to mask your feelings anymore. You'll say it, but it comes across in such a loving way because it's your truth. Yeah, you don't hide from things anymore. You own it, you out it. Like you share things like you never would have shared in the past because you were embarrassed about, but you're like, you know what? That's part of me. And you can do that with your partner too. You start to own your stuff with them and be like, yeah, you know what? I was a complete jerk when I said that, or I understand. Like my husband, for instance, he calls it the old Beth and the new Beth. He's like, uh-oh, old Beth's coming out. I'm like, you're right. I'm just really tired. I'm sorry. I'm getting cranky and just like snapping on you about little things. So he calls me out on it and we can laugh about it. I don't get my back up like I would have been in the past being like, you said what to me? Yeah, right. Like you're the one who's in a cranky mood.
Yeah. And Beth, let me speak on that because I am finding myself, because I'm gonna be honest with you, I believe in being transparent with all of this, but I was one of those ones, I mask everything. Like I took it like, okay, I don't want conflict. But does age play into this? Because I feel like the closer as I'm becoming more mature, I'm like, you know what, forget this. Like, and I'm learning now to like, okay, articulate my feelings and trying my best to articulate in a healthy way, but where I'm like, I no longer want to suppress it. I want to live a long time. And I realized for me taking it all in, it was just stressing me out. I had tension all in my neck, my back. Even when I go get a massage, they're like, girl, what are you carrying? And like, because they could feel the tension, like, right. And so I'm like, I don't want that anymore. I don't want to die for them. I want to see my kids. I want to grow older and all of that stuff. But does age play any into that? Like, or do
old food.
Yeah, it definitely does. Like, wouldn't it be amazing if we could all have this, like, I don't want to use the word awakening, but it's really just an understanding of yourself, like really understand and find out who you really are and how you want to act and not care anymore about what other people think. If we could only figure that out in our early 20s, it'd be amazing. But so often what happens is over time, we are so out of alignment. Like as time goes on, we like start doing things that other people want us to do. We go to a university, someone wants us to go, our parents want us to go to study this instead of this. And we marry someone and all of a sudden we're compromising. We just get more exhausted because we're doing all these things that don't really light us up. And then we hit a point where we have a mental breakdown, panic attacks, end up in the hospital with some sort of disease. And maybe it doesn't have to be that drastic, but we get to a point where we're like, enough is enough. And that's usually when we start this path. So if everyone can start it a bit before crisis happens, that would be amazing. And I wish I'd figured this out when I was in my early 20s, but everyone will have their moment when the time is right. But usually the older we get, that's usually when our threshold of being able to hold this much stress and exhaustion finally like breaks and we're like, I gotta do something.
Right. And that's one thing that I am trying to, I'm like, man, if I could just teach this to my kids, like to be respectful, don't get me wrong, right? But like, I want them to like, I want them to be self-aware of themselves, right? I want them to be self-aware of themselves and like, okay, I don't know, because I want them to get it early on than I did. Then yeah,
That's right. And
I think you're doing it.
Mhm.
I was just gonna say, I think you're doing it. Like you're talking to them about the emotions. Emotions are the foundation of this. Like what triggered you? My sister stole my toy. What do you feel? I feel angry. What do you want to do? I want to punch her. Like just talking about that stuff and just understanding that there's a belief there. Why do you want to punch her? Because she took my stuff. Like that is mine. That's his belief is it belongs to me. No one can take things from me. Just understanding them in that process and having them break it down by like what triggered me, what's the emotion, what's the belief here, and then what's the thought process. Hit them because that's the way I'm going to get it back.
Exactly, and it goes a long way.
Yeah.
We thank you guys for listening. A testimony, Beth, that I want to share with you. Young lady wrote this after listening to the episode, and Mr. Podcast. She said, "My husband and I are in a much better space now, and I'm glad we are giving us another chance. It was just a lot of miscommunication, contempt, criticism, me wanting to be superwoman by choice, him not being held accountable, children, careers, etc. Therapy, Soulify Wellness. You all go into Soulify Wellness now. Follow her. Reach out to her now. Y'all's podcast, Mr. and Mrs. Podcast, prayer, journaling, and a lot of self-reflection is what is keeping us going. We had to dig deep and be the mirror for one another and actually see how we were hurting one another. As Dana stated, his flaws are the things I love about him. I wouldn't trade our story for anything in the world except maybe the lottery. Just kidding. All jokes aside. But thank you all for doing what you're doing. So that's the why that we have these conversations too, that people who could be leading to divorce are now turning to like, man, I was pointing the finger at him or her this whole time, but I had to accept some of the blame in the situation, but also let's get together for some of the solutions. So thank you for doing what you do, Beth. Salute to you. I want to close out with one thing we've learned today. Right there that you have. Anybody can go first.
Go ahead.
Are you gonna go? Okay. I learned that conflict is a great thing if it's managed well. And I think everything you do, business, life, kids with toys, conflict is a part of it. Not communicating that is not an option. And I think that once you're able to effectively learn and communicate the root cause of your feeling, I feel this way, you can get to a solution sooner if you're able to do that. But I think it's really being able to accept conflict and talk through it and not avoid it, not push it down. And it's going to come out. You can either take care of it now, or you can take care of it in divorce court to where you're letting it out. So I say take care of it now.
Yeah. I would say definitely try to learn the triggers of, to avoid going down the path of being roommates. I think that's important as far as like just recognizing those things earlier on, because we want all marriages to be successful. No marriage is perfect by no means. And just understanding emotions and working on yourself. I would both say you have to work on yourself first in order to come back. And some people, they may not need to do that. But I think if we all are real and true with ourselves, we may realize that, hey, it's not your partner. It may be some things that's internal within you that may need to help.
They're gonna put you out the woman's club for that, Dana. Don't say it's her husband's fault.
I love that. That was good. Here's what I learned. I learned that working on your marriage is like building a six-pack. Thanks, Jack.
Yes. It takes a little long. You gotta work.
Yes.
You gotta work.
If you want that six-pack in the marriage.
You gotta work. But I think it works the same way. Many people want the results, but not the work for it. Like we don't want to put the work in for it. I want the marriage that we're traveling, we're having a good time. The kids are well behaved. Nothing gets colored on the wall. Nothing happens. I want that. But if it takes me dealing with the root cause of my root or being able to deal with conflict or call Soulify Wellness and she has me crying on the other end of the Zoom call, that hurts. That doesn't feel good.
But it's so funny that you said that. They joke around here because my kids know don't touch my walls. That's a big pet peeve of mine. But that's something that even when their friends come over, I'm like, don't touch my walls, right? But I think that's something I was able to train them to do, right? As an earlier age, right? But you don't have the opportunity with your spouse to train them from an earlier age, right? You get them when they're already set in their ways. So now you have to learn how to grow together and recognize like, hey, there's some things that Jeff brought some baggage, Dana brought some baggage, right? But how can we work through those things? Because we didn't get unfortunately, I didn't get a chance to raise Jeff the way that I wanted him to.
We all thank the Lord.
And the scary part of that too is not that you didn't get a chance to raise him. It's more that what is in that backpack. What is he carrying around? Sometimes, like you just said, you have to do that hard work and you have to look in there. You got to look at your past. And yeah, there's the backpack. Yeah, the thing is, you don't have to relive your past. You have to acknowledge it layer by layer. Really gently, you pull it back and you almost see it with empowerment. It doesn't own you anymore. The story isn't defining you. You can see it. And you can almost not thank it for having happened to you, but give it gratitude for where you are now. So it's a real like shift in how you see your past and how you heal from your past. So you can see it and it doesn't give you this visceral reaction of wanting to like, this icky feeling.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So thank you all for listening. You do not have to stay roommates. You don't have to, get on that slippery slope. There's help out there. Work on yourself. Continue to work on you. Even if you feel like your spouse they may have some issues. I'm sure they do too as well, but work on yourself and continue to build up. And you may see problems you used to see before. The old Jeff may see problems. The new Jeff may see an opportunity.
Yeah.
To get to that place. The same Beth, the old Beth, the new Beth there as well as your husband. Shout out your husband there as well.
I'm gonna change my Instagram to New Dana.
The old one is going away. Boy, we don't want it to revive out of this situation. So maybe you have the same testimony there. So thank you. And if you have not, please reach out to Soulify Wellness. Beth, you have anything that you want to say? If they want to reach out to you now, they're on this, they're roommates. They want to get out of that. They have a child that's beating and hollering from the inside. And they've been tugging them down. They finally found someone. How can they reach out to you?
Yeah, a great way to get a hold of me is on Instagram or Facebook. Pretty much any social media, you can look me up. I have this great guide called 3 Ways to Save a Marriage, and it has these 3 proven strategies, 3 strategies to get you started in this process so that you can create that affection and arguments and get to a place where you can have that marriage that you really, really want.
So it's on you now. The ball is in your court. The ball is in your court. You can't play victim anymore and say it's there. You gotta do something. It's easy to complain. It's harder to take that next step and actually start working toward getting there. So thank you guys for listening, watching, whatever you're doing. Tell somebody else about the best marriage relationship podcast in the world, the Mr. and Mrs. Mr. Podcast, where our goal is to reach 7 million couples. Will you be one?
7 million. Is there 7 million couples? Beth, you know how many couples it is in the world?
I was trying to do the math when he said that. I'm like, okay, that's only 14 million people, right? Like that's totally doable. Like, what does the US have? Like 300 million?
Thank you. Exactly.
Like, you're totally doable.
Exactly. One couple at a time. One couple at a time. And so you're listening and watching today, not by accident. So thank you for listening at this point in time. We always like to end with the Mr. Mantra. That's where whether you argue through this time, you argue by yourself, look in the mirror, look with your spouse if you listen together, and say these wonderful 3 things.
Yes.
I like you, I love you, and I want you. It helps out. It helps out to end the conversation. So you end off at least you're not roommates and you keep doing that. That's one thing. So we love you guys. God loves you. Ain't nothing you can do about it. Tune in every Tuesday. There's a new episode. Thank you. Please visit Beth at Soulify Wellness. Work on yourself, if nothing else. Thank you, guys.